Most people think promotions happen when performance becomes impossible to ignore. A review cycle arrives. Numbers are discussed. Someone gets recognized. That is the story organizations tell because it makes the system look rational. But promotions rarely begin there. They begin much earlier, when leadership starts asking a quiet question they never say out loud. Can power move toward this person without creating instability? Promotions are not rewards. They are transfers of risk. The moment someone moves upward, influence expands. Decisions carry more weight. Mistakes spread farther. And leadership is not thinking about effort when they evaluate that shift. They are thinking about safety. This is where most professionals misread the game. You believe output drives promotion. Leadership is watching something else. How you behave when certainty disappears. Watch the moment an expectation becomes unclear. Some people rush to ask for reassurance. Some freeze, waiting for clarity. Some move fast, just to escape the discomfort of not knowing. That moment is a behavioral X-ray. Ambiguity is not just a communication gap. It is a trigger, and triggers reveal orientation. Leadership already assumes you can do the work. If you couldn't, you would not be in the room. What they are trying to understand is whether your thinking collapses when structure fades. Every interaction leaves evidence, reaction receipts.
How quickly you defend yourself when challenged. How long you speak after making a point. Whether your tone shifts when someone senior enters the conversation. These signals accumulate into something invisible but powerful. An access ledger. No one writes it down, no one explains it, but it exists. And long before promotions are discussed, that ledger is already shaping outcomes. Most people think leadership evaluates performance during formal reviews.
The real evaluation happens quietly, inside ordinary moments that feel forgettable. A delayed response to your proposal. A meeting where feedback never comes. A decision that moves forward without acknowledgement. Silence appears. That silence is another trigger. Watch what happens. Some people start sending follow-ups to reduce anxiety. They explain more than necessary. They try to secure confirmation that they are still aligned. From leadership's perspective, something else appears. Supervision cost. Because every signal that you need reassurance suggests more attention will be required later. And attention is the most protected resource at senior levels. The higher someone rises, the more aggressively they defend cognitive space. This is why emotional leakage matters more than people realize. A small visible reaction feels harmless when you experience it.
But leadership reads it differently. If pressure increases, will this person create noise or clarity? That question sits quietly beneath promotion decisions. Machiavelli described this long before modern organizations existed. Power moves toward where risk feels controllable. Promotions follow the same logic. The system is not rewarding effort, it is allocating stability. Leadership expands authority toward people who feel predictable under pressure.
Predictability is not about being passive. It is about emotional containment. Pressure arrives without warning. Deadlines compress. Priorities shift. Resources disappear. This is where behavioral X-rays become obvious. Watch the moment pressure hits. Some people speak faster. Some explain longer. Some start defending decisions before anyone questions them. Pressure exposes the mechanism beneath performance. And the mechanism matters more than the outcome. Because outcomes fluctuate, patterns don't. Leadership isn't trying to read your intentions. They are reading your patterns. Patterns predict future risk, and promotions are future decisions, not past rewards. This is where the cost layer appears, and most people never see it. Working harder often increases your value, but it can also increase your containment cost. If you become the person who solves everything at your level,
leadership hesitates to move you. Not because you lack capability, because your absence creates structural instability. You become essential where you are, reliable, useful, and quietly trapped. There is a moment many high performers recognize only in hindsight. Someone who carries the workload, solves problems quickly, keeps things running when pressure rises. Everyone depends on them. Then promotion season arrives, and the role goes to someone else. Someone who appears less essential, sometimes even less impressive on paper. From the outside, it feels irrational, political, unfair. But leadership is not comparing effort. They are comparing structural risk. Removing the high performer creates a vacuum. Processes slow, knowledge disappears. The system destabilizes. So the safer choice becomes someone whose absence creates less disruption. This is the quiet inversion most professionals never see. Excellence can increase value while reducing mobility. The very behaviors that make you indispensable at one level can make leadership hesitate to move you higher. Because promotions are not about rewarding who holds the system together. They are about deciding who can leave their current position without the structure shaking. Once you see this clearly, performance stops being the question. You stop asking how to be needed. You start asking how to become movable. This is why promotions sometimes go to people who seem less technically strong. From your perspective, it feels political. From leadership's perspective, they are solving a structural problem. Who can expand without breaking the current system? Politics is not always manipulation. Often, it is simply the psychology of risk allocation. The system protects stability first. This is the first major shift of a sovereign mindset. You stop asking, "How do I prove I deserve a promotion?" and start asking, "How do I reduce uncertainty around me?" That shift changes behavior immediately. You stop reacting to every signal. You stop chasing validation loops. You start operating with orientation instead of performance anxiety. And leadership feels that difference long before they can explain it. Another trigger appears during opportunity. Extra work arrives. Responsibilities expand quietly. Requests increase without formal recognition. Most people interpret this as proof they are being trusted. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's a boundary test. Watch the behavioral X-ray. Some people say yes to everything. They absorb work without calibration. They believe availability equals commitment. But endless availability signals something else. Lack of prioritization. Authority requires selectivity. Leadership is watching whether you can protect focus, because higher roles demand constant trade-offs. If you cannot manage boundaries now, leadership imagines chaos later. The cost becomes clear. Reliability earns work. Strategy earns promotion. And this is where many careers stall without anyone understanding why. The system keeps rewarding effort while withholding influence. Because effort alone doesn't reduce risk, calm judgment does. Marcus Aurelius treated self-governance as a prerequisite for governing anything else. Organizations quietly follow the same principle. They promote people whose internal stability appears transferable. Someone who remains consistent, regardless of the audience. Someone whose behavior doesn't change when hierarchy shifts. Someone who can carry tension without spreading it. Presence is not charisma. It is the absence of visible instability. Leadership notices this immediately, because calm scales. Brilliance can be unpredictable. Calm judgment scales, and promotions are scaling decisions. At some point, something subtle happens. You stop being evaluated for what you do, and start being evaluated for what leadership imagines you becoming. This is the invisible transition most people miss. The access ledger begins projecting forward. If this person gains authority, what happens to the environment around them? Do meetings become clearer or noisier? Do decisions stabilize or fragment? Does pressure move downward smoothly
or explode outward. Leadership runs this simulation constantly. You rarely see it happening, but you feel the outcome. One person keeps getting included earlier in conversations. Another keeps executing without gaining influence.
The difference is rarely intelligence. It is psychological predictability. This is why promotion politics feels mysterious. The decision is often made long before formal discussions begin. By the time the announcement happens, leadership is confirming a pattern that already feels obvious to them. There is another layer most people never notice because it doesn't feel like evaluation. It feels like normal interaction. A senior leader asks for your opinion, but does not follow it immediately. A decision goes a different direction. Your idea is acknowledged, then quietly set aside. This moment triggers something subtle. Many professionals interpret it as rejection. They start explaining more, clarifying their reasoning, trying to prove the idea deserved more weight. That reaction becomes a behavioral X-ray. Because leadership is not only watching the quality of your thinking,
They are watching your relationship with influence itself. Can you contribute without needing ownership? Can you detach your identity from the outcome? Can you stay stable when your input doesn't immediately change direction? They reveal authority maturity. People early in their careers often treat influence like validation. If their idea wins, they feel secure. If it doesn't, they feel diminished. But leadership reads this differently. If your emotional state moves with every decision outcome, your stability becomes expensive at higher levels. Authority requires a different posture. You contribute clearly. You release attachment. You continue orienting toward the objective instead of defending your contribution. This is where the access ledger quietly shifts. Leadership starts noticing that you are not trying to win every moment. You are trying to move the system forward. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Because promotion decisions are rarely about who has the best ideas. They are about who can participate in disagreement without creating emotional drag. Who can lose a point without losing composure. Who can adapt direction without signaling internal collapse. These signals feel small when you experience them, but from above, they predict something critical. How you will behave once your decisions begin affecting larger groups of people. And the higher the level, the more leadership values emotional neutrality over visible brilliance. Not because brilliance is unimportant, because neutrality scales. Someone who stays stable when their influence is limited is far more likely to remain stable when their influence expands. And this is where the real cost appears for most professionals. They keep optimizing for performance metrics, while the system is evaluating behavioral signals. They increase output, work longer, say yes faster, and unintentionally reinforce the identity of executor instead of decision maker. Executors solve problems inside the system. Leaders reshape how the system moves. Promotion happens when leadership believes your thinking reduces complexity rather than adding to it. That belief forms slowly, quietly, through dozens of small moments you barely remember. A pause before responding instead of immediate defense. A clear decision made without drama. A calm reaction when something goes wrong. These moments feel small from inside. From above, they form a pattern. And once that pattern stabilizes, promotions start feeling inevitable. Not because you demanded them, because the system feels safer expanding around you. This is the paradox most people never realize. The harder you try to appear promotable, the more you signal uncertainty. The more you operate with internal stability, the less you need to prove anything. And that is when influence begins moving toward you. Because in the end, promotions are not about recognition. They are about trust under expansion. Leadership is asking one question over and over. Can responsibility move toward this person without increasing uncertainty? When the answer becomes yes, politics stops feeling random.
you start seeing the structure beneath the decisions. And once you see that structure, you realize something uncomfortable. The promotion decision rarely happens when your title changes. It happens the moment the hierarchy decides your psychological footprint feels safe to expand.
There is a point where the obvious tests disappear. You stop feeling watched. Instructions become lighter. Feedback becomes less frequent. People assume you understand context without needing every detail explained. Most professionals interpret this as safety. It isn't. It is a transition into a quieter phase of evaluation, one that determines whether influence actually expands or quietly stops. Because once leadership believes you are capable, the question changes. Not, can this person perform, but what happens when no one is directing them? This is where promotion politics becomes invisible. Oversight fades. Leadership is watching how you behave when structure becomes thin. That moment triggers something subtle. Without clear feedback, some people slow down. They hesitate, afraid of making mistakes without approval. Others swing the opposite direction. They move aggressively, mistaking autonomy for freedom from alignment. Both reactions reveal the same mechanism: dependence on external structure. True autonomy looks different. It is quiet. You make decisions without announcing every step. You maintain alignment without constant visibility. You communicate clearly without turning updates into self-defense. This is where a new set of behavioral X-rays appear: how you frame progress. Some people speak as if proving they deserve trust. Long explanations, preemptive justifications, visible concern about how their decisions are perceived. Others communicate differently: short, clear, oriented toward outcomes instead of personal effort. Leadership reads the difference immediately. One signals anxiety around authority. The other signals ownership. And ownership is where promotion decisions accelerate. Because ownership reduces monitoring cost. The less emotional energy leadership spends managing your reactions, the safer it feels to expand your influence. This is the hidden mechanism most people miss. Promotions are not only about what you can handle. They are about how much attention you require while handling it. Attention is the real currency at senior levels, and the access ledger keeps updating. Every time you escalate a problem too quickly, every time you defend instead of clarify, every time your tone changes when stakes rise. These moments accumulate quietly. Leadership begins projecting forward again. If this person had more authority, would complexity increase or decrease? That projection shapes everything. Eventually, small decisions begin appearing. A meeting gets delegated to you. A client issue lands on your desk without instruction. Two priorities conflict, and no one tells you which matters more. These are not random moments. They are judgment tests. Triggers designed to reveal how you think when the answer is not obvious. Watch the reactions. Some people escalate immediately, protecting themselves from risk. Some delay action, waiting for perfect clarity. Some move fast, just to relieve internal discomfort. All three reveal something. A sovereign mindset responds differently. You assess context. You define boundaries. You move with calibrated judgment, and you document thinking clearly enough that others can follow your reasoning without emotional explanation. Leadership notices this more than outcomes. Because outcomes fluctuate. Judgment patterns persist. This is why two people can make the same mistake and be perceived completely differently. One becomes defensive, the other stabilizes quickly. Recovery speed becomes a signal of maturity. The higher the level, the more mistakes are judged by response rather than result. Can you restore clarity without spreading instability? That question quietly defines promotion readiness. Another trigger appears during disagreement. Someone challenges your direction. The room expects tension. Behavioral X-rays become immediate. Do you argue to win?
Do you retreat to avoid friction? Or do you separate the idea from identity? Authority grows when reactions become quieter, while thinking becomes clearer. You challenge without escalation. You clarify without defensiveness. You maintain orientation toward the objective instead of protecting ego. Leadership watches this closely, because influence amplifies conflict.
If disagreement destabilizes you now, it will destabilize teams later. This is why emotional containment keeps appearing inside promotion decisions. Not because leaders want emotionless people, because they need predictable environments. People who absorb tension instead of spreading it. At this stage, access often increases. You are invited into conversations earlier. Context appears before decisions finalize. Questions shift from, "Can you do this?" to, "What do you think?" Many people make a mistake here. They interpret access as validation. They speak more, explain more, try to prove they belong. Access itself becomes a trigger. Leadership is watching whether proximity to power changes your behavior. Do you become louder or more precise? There is another subtle trigger that appears here, and most people miss it because it feels positive. Senior leaders begin agreeing with you more often. Your suggestions receive less resistance. Meetings move faster when you speak. Access magnifies patterns. Small tendencies become highly visible. This is where promotion politics becomes extremely psychological. Leadership is not only evaluating your decisions, they are evaluating how others react to you. Do people feel calmer when you speak? Do conversations become clearer? Does the room orient around your framing or become more fragmented? These signals matter because promotions are social decisions, not individual ones. Authority must be accepted, not just assigned. And acceptance begins long before titles change. This is why some people feel stuck despite strong performance. They are competent, but their psychological footprint creates friction. Too much explanation. Too much visible attachment to outcomes. Too much need for agreement. Leadership senses future instability, and hesitation appears. Another subtle shift happens here. Standards become implicit. No one tells you exactly what to do. You are expected to read context. People operating from reaction struggle here. They look for clear rules, clear approval, clear boundaries. But higher levels rarely provide that clarity. The sovereign mindset adapts differently. You read priorities instead of instructions. You notice where attention goes. You observe what leadership protects. You align with direction rather than waiting for explicit permission. This signals strategic thinking. And strategy is what leadership ultimately promotes, not effort, not intensity, direction. Gracian treated discretion as strategic restraint, knowing when restraint creates more power than motion. Modern hierarchy rewards the same principle: psychological economy. You do not react to every stimulus. You conserve energy for decisions that matter. And people begin to feel something difficult to describe. Safety, not comfort. Stability. The sense that complexity becomes easier around you. This is when trust begins solidifying. Not dramatically, quietly. Leadership stops checking as often. Assumptions shift. Responsibility moves toward you without announcement. And many people still miss it. Because nothing external looks different yet. But internally, the ledger has changed. At this point, another cost appears, and it surprises many professionals. Influence changes how your emotions affect the system. Small reactions now ripple outward. A frustrated tone spreads tension. A calm response stabilizes others. Leadership watches whether you understand this instinctively. Can you disagree without destabilizing the room? Can you deliver difficult feedback without creating fear? Can you absorb pressure without passing it downward? These signals matter more than technical skill at higher levels. Because authority is environmental, your internal state becomes part of the system. People begin orienting around you emotionally, and leadership notices who manages that responsibility naturally. There is a final test that rarely feels like a test at all. It appears when something goes wrong and no one rushes in to help. A decision stalls. A project drifts. Tension builds quietly. Leadership waits. Not because they don't see the problem, because they want to see what you do before the situation becomes visible to everyone else. This is where authority psychology becomes clear. Some people immediately look upward for direction. Some begin explaining why the situation happened. Some start protecting themselves before solving anything. These reactions reveal the same underlying trigger: fear of ownership. But people moving toward real authority respond differently. They stabilize first. They reduce noise, clarify reality, make the next decision obvious for everyone else. And they do it without announcing that they are doing it. This is where the access ledger quietly locks. Because leadership is not only watching whether you solve problems, they are watching whether your presence reduces the emotional temperature when things become uncertain. Anyone can look competent when momentum is strong. Very few people create stability when momentum breaks. And this is often the moment promotions quietly finalize. Not during success, during contained recovery. When leadership sees that uncertainty moves through you without multiplying. Eventually, something shifts again. You stop thinking about being evaluated. Your attention moves toward clarity and long-term direction. You stop asking how you are being perceived. You focus on what moves the system forward. Paradoxically, this is often when promotion decisions finalize. Because the desire to appear promotable disappears. What remains is consistency. And consistency is what leadership trusts most. There is one more psychological shift that separates people who are considered ready from those who remain candidates. You stop needing visible momentum. Most professionals feel secure when progress is obvious, when feedback is clear, decisions move quickly, and results are visible. But higher levels rarely feel like that. Progress becomes slower. Signals become quieter. Outcomes take longer to appear. And this delay becomes a trigger. Some people start forcing motion just to feel certainty again. They initiate unnecessary changes. They speak more than required. They create activity to escape ambiguity. Leadership notices immediately. Because forcing momentum often creates instability disguised as leadership. Real authority tolerates slower movement when the direction is correct. It understands that influence is not measured by how much motion you create, but by how little disruption appears around your decisions. When someone can hold steady without chasing visible progress, leadership sees something rare: emotional patience. And emotional patience is one of the clearest indicators that power can expand safely. Predictable under pressure, calm during ambiguity, clear without excess explanation. This is why intensity attracts attention, but stability attracts responsibility. Responsibility is where real authority begins, and authority rarely arrives with noise. It arrives quietly. One day you notice conversations changing, questions become more strategic. People ask for perspective instead of execution. You are included earlier, not later. That moment is not the beginning of trust. It is the result of dozens of invisible decisions already made. Promotions are not about proving you deserve more. They are about reducing uncertainty so consistently that expanding your influence feels safe. The promotion decision rarely happens when your title changes. It happens when leadership decides your presence lowers complexity instead of increasing it.